Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into our weekly agricultural updates for August 16th, 2026. If you've been keeping up with the weekly headlines lately, you already know that this season's erratic climate is creating massive downstream effects, and we're tracking every single ripple. From localized flash floods to shifting crop acreage and wild swings in market prices, the data is telling a really fascinating, complex story about risk and resilience. Let's get into it.
Here is a quick look at our agenda for today. We've got our insights organized into 5 core sections: weather shifts and crop intelligence, inputs, markets and policy signals, regional hotspots and systems, ground reality for farmers, and finally, our strategic outlook and actions.
Starting right off with Section 1, Weather Shifts and Crop Intelligence, where we're tracking the monsoon's impact on kharif sowing. Kicking off our agro-climatic analysis, we've seen an absolute whiplash of a shift this season. Think back to June. We started with a severe El Niño-driven monsoon deficit of about 40%, which left a massive chunk of our sowing area under serious drought stress. But look at this pivot. By mid-August, we aren't just seeing a few catch-up showers, we are tracking heavily concentrated active rainfall clusters right across the central, eastern, and Himalayan belts. This is literally triggering red and orange alerts for flash floods, so we've swung from extreme bone-dry conditions to extreme wet conditions in just a matter of weeks. Because the monsoon was so heavily delayed at the start, we're now witnessing an intense phenomenon known as catch-up sowing. Farmers are quite literally racing against the clock. In the areas where rainfall has suddenly surged, especially in those eastern and central belts, sowing operations have just gone into overdrive to close the gap. It is completely reshaping our crop acreage data as we push deeper into August.
So digging into our crop intelligence, there is a sharp divergence happening in what exactly is going into the ground. Overall, kharif sowing is actually only down by about 2% compared to last year, but the mix itself is drastically different. We have some clear winners: climate-resilient millets, which of course are getting a nice bump from the Sri Anna policy push, and irrigated sugarcane are thriving right now. Rice and pulses have largely recovered too. But on the other side of the ledger, oilseeds like soybean and especially cotton are severely stressed and seriously lagging behind.
To put that stress into a concrete perspective, cotton sowing had fallen by 5 to 6 lakh hectares by late June compared to last year, and it's still staying significantly below normal today. That is a staggering drop, and it's not just a story about bad weather, it reflects acute farmer caution. When you combine completely unpredictable rainfall with high pest concerns and wild price volatility, farmers in states like Maharashtra, Telangana, and Gujarat are actively making the choice to pull back from these high-risk crops.
Moving along to Section 2, Inputs, Markets, and Policy Signals. Let's break down the economics of agriculture this week.
Shifting gears to input economics, we actually have a massive and honestly surprising piece of positive news amidst all this weather chaos. Fertilizer stocks for the Kharif 2026 season are currently sitting at roughly 50% of the total seasonal requirement. To give you some context on why that's a big deal, typically at this point in the season, we'd expect that number to be hovering closer to just 33%.
Because of this strong position, which is backed up by really robust domestic output and some smart advanced planning for imports, officials are explicitly describing the fertilizer situation as comfortable. This is absolutely crucial because it helps insulate smallholder farmers from any sudden global cost spikes or supply chain shocks right when they are navigating an incredibly tricky growing season. However, the financial picture gets a lot more complicated when we look at the outputs. Taking a look at wheat Monday prices around mid-August, the national average is sitting at roughly 2,536 rupees per quintal. But notice the massive spread here. The lows are hitting just 1,600 rupees. In practical terms, this means a huge share of the produce coming out of surplus belts is trading well below the minimum support price, or MSP. Because of this, a lot of farmers are finding their livelihoods heavily reliant on government procurement through the Food Corporation of India just to stabilize their returns. And you know, that intense reliance on price floors naturally breeds market sensitivity. As part of our market and policy signals this week, we've been observing the August 10th protests by farmers' organizations and trade unions. These mobilizations are a direct reflection of domestic producers' deep anxieties regarding a proposed India-US trade deal. There are very real concerns that import competition could depress domestic prices and basically pull the rug out from under the MSP system that they rely on so heavily. Okay, let's jump to Section 3, Regional Hotspots and Systems. We're going to map out the current vulnerabilities on the ground.
Mapping out our current regional hotspots really reveals a tale of contrasting risks. Over in East Rajasthan and West MP, intense red alert rainfall is actively threatening young cotton and soybean stands with major waterlogging and soil erosion. Then, you look at the east. In Gangetic West Bengal and Odisha, and heavy rains there are actually beneficial for rice transplanting, but simultaneously, they're posing severe flash flood risks in low-lying areas. Meanwhile, the irrigated Northwest remains almost totally insulated. They are enjoying low weather risk and the safety of a strong MSP procurement cushion.
When it comes to our system's interpretation of Indian agriculture right now, we are seeing a repeating domino effect. We like to call it the system's cascade. It all starts with a volatile sky, a severe drought followed by concentrated heavy rain. That causes sowing disruptions and forced crop shifts. Those shifts then create price volatility in vulnerable crops like pulses and oilseeds, which ultimately forces this massive income dependence straight onto state buffer systems and the MSP.
That brings us to Section 4, Ground Reality for Farmers. Let's talk about the human impact behind all this data.
Diving into the farmer-level implications, there is just a stark, undeniable contrast in resilience out there. Rain-fed smallholders are bearing the absolute brunt of this climate shock. They're dealing with sky-high uncertainty, making agonizing split-second decisions about whether to risk planting cotton or switch over to millets, and they are utterly dependent on local procurement centers for their cash flow. Conversely, large irrigated farms, like the ones in Punjab or canal-served belts, can pretty much just absorb the variability. They can finish their sowing regardless of delayed rains, hedge their price risks, and are even busy investing in the AI-driven drones and precision tech we see showcased at events like AgTech India.
Finally, let's hit Section 5, Strategic Outlook and Actions. Here's how we navigate the next 4 to 8 weeks.
Shaping our strategic outlook for the immediate future, here are the key market and policy triggers you absolutely need to monitor. First, watch the Food Corporation of India procurement volumes closely. That's going to dictate how much surplus stock accumulates. Keep a very close eye out for any trade policy notifications regarding exports or imports, especially given the recent protests we discussed. Watch the price behavior of cotton and soybeans as the finalized acreage data starts to firm up. And lastly, track the ongoing rollout of government solar pump schemes, which are proving to be a game changer for structurally reducing irrigation energy costs for farmers.
Now for some actionable insights based on this week's data. For the farmers and ag professionals tuning in, if you're operating in flood-prone belts currently under IMD red alerts, your immediate priority has to be on clearing drainage channels and quick dewatering of paddies to prevent root damage. In the drier, rain-fed zones, stagger your sowing based on hyperlocal forecasts, not just the calendar date, and seriously consider shorter duration millets. And for those in surplus zones dealing with softer prices, get registered early on digital portals to lock in your MSP and completely avoid distress selling.
For the agronomist, agri-tech startups, and policymakers joining us, the mandate is incredibly clear. We need to leverage this week's extreme sowing heterogeneity to deploy highly targeted precision advisory, meaning we have to completely differentiate between flood protocols in the east and moisture conservation tactics in the west. We need to actively integrate alerts from the National Pest Surveillance System, especially for those high-humidity cotton zones. And from a policy standpoint, we've got to channel MSP support aggressively toward those lagging pulses and oilseeds to incentivize planting, all while doubling down on developing better drought-tolerant varieties.
I want to wrap up today's explainer by leaving you with a provocative thought to ponder. As we sit here watching this repeating cycle of climate shocks, a cycle that is driving farmers away from risky crops and deeper into a reliance on state-procured rice and wheat, we really have to ask, will structural underinvestment in drought-proofing our rain-fed regions ultimately break our entire buffer stock system? Seriously, if we don't address the root vulnerabilities of our most exposed farmers, can our state support mechanisms actually withstand this mounting pressure year after year? Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep a close eye on those skies.